Hello and welcome to today's tutorial. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make a simple straight dress with underarm darts. In this tutorial, I'll be taking an underarm dart in front to give fitting to this dress. If you would like to see how I made this, please watch the end of this tutorial. To all returning subscribers, I appreciate you all. Thank you for your likes. And if this is your first time seeing my video, you're welcome. Please click on the subscribe button to subscribe if you're here to subscribe to this channel. Also turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And also don't forget to like this video. I'll be cutting the front part first, so I folded my fabric using the biggest circumference, which is quarter of the hip measurement plus extra 2 inches. I've also folded my lining. I'll be lining this dress. So before you start, you have to take the measurement. You have to tie a rope or string around your waist and take the measurement from the shoulder to the front waist and from the shoulder to the back half length. Okay, you notice the difference and you note that difference, the difference between the front half length and the back half length. Here I've ruled out some lines, the vertical lines. The first line is the shoulder line. From the shoulder line to 9 inches is half of the round armhole, which is the chest line. Then to 10.5 inches is the bust line. And then 17 inches is the front half length that I measured. And from there I measured 9 inches downward for the hip line. And the length for the front dress is going to be 60 inches plus extra 1.5 inches hemming allowance. For this dress, we would be needing the bust line, the bust point line. So measure yours and note that. On the shoulder line, I'm going to take the shoulder slope, I'm going to use the 3-inch, 8-inch standard for shoulder slope. At the 8-inch point, I came down by 1 inch and connected to the 3-inch point I noted for the shoulder slope. Then I'm going to take the neck. The neckline, the neck width of 3.5 inches and a neck depth of 6 inches. I'm making a V neckline in front, but I took this neck depth but later increased to 7 inches. At this point I just took 6 inches for neck depth, so you can take yours whatever works best for you. On the shoulder line and on the chest line, I imputed 8.5 inches, which is half of the shoulder measurement, and connected, as you can see. Then I found the midpoint of the line from the shoulder slope to the chest line, and then at the midpoint I came in by ½ inch for the front armhole curve. On the chest line I imputed 9.5 inches, which is quarter of the bust measurement. I did not add an ease to this measurement, but you can add quarter inch ease to yours if you like. And I'm just making the armhole curve. So at this point what I'm doing is just the basic bodice. I'm just drafting the basic bodice at this point. On the shoulder I'm going to take ½ inch for joining allowance, for joining the front and the back shoulder together. On the waist I'm going to impute quarter of the waist measurement, which is 8.5 inches plus extra ½ inch for ease. I want ease on the waist, so I'm going to impute 9 inches. That's 8.5 plus ½ inch, making it 9 inches. And I'm going to connect the measurements I have on the chest line to the measurements on the waistline. Then I'm going to add 1.5 inches sewing allowance on both the waistline and on the chest line and connect as well. On the hip I'm going to impute quarter of the hip measurement, which is 11 inches plus extra 0.25 ease. Quarter inch ease, that's what I'm adding on the hip. You can add ½ inch as well. And then I'm going to connect the measurements on the hip to the measurements on the waist. I'll also add 1.5 inches sewing allowance on the hip and connect as well. Then I'm going to bring down the exact measurements I have on the hip on the hemline. So the hemline, the measurement on the hemline is the exact measurement I have on the hip line. And then I'll go ahead and connect the measurements on the hemline to the measurements on the hip line. That is what I'm doing now. So at this point the basic dress is complete. The basic dress pattern is complete. So I'll go ahead and take the underarm dart. So remember that from the shoulder to 10.5 inches is the bust point line. On the bust point line I'm going to impute 4 inches, which is half of the nipple to nipple measurement I'm working with in this video. Then from the chest line on the main main measurement, the body measurement, I came down by 2 inches, not on the seam allowance. So note what I did. From that 2 inches, I came down again by 2 inches, which is the difference between the back half length and the front half length. The front half length is 17 inches and the back half length is 15 inches. So I also divided that measurement into 2. Then from the nipple to nipple measurement I noted, I came outward again by 1 inch, and I'm connecting the measurements I have on this the body measurement, the 2 inches, that I'm connecting it to this 1 inch away from the nipple to nipple measurement on the bust point line. Just look at what I'm doing. That 2 inches I took, which is the difference in height between the front and the back, will be sewn up. That is the dart that will be sewn up. Okay, so once the dart is taken, just extend the dart legs into the seam allowance. You extend them. Then what I'm going to do to avoid shortage, I'm going to measure what I have on this dart leg, the total length of the dart. I'll measure it and make sure that the measurement corresponds with the measurement on the other dart leg. So I measured, and this other dart leg is shorter by about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to extend this dart leg so that they will be equal. When I sew them up, they will be equal. Then I'll connect it back to the chest line. Then I'll connect it back to this other dart leg. Just watch what I'm doing. Okay, so I've connected this way. So when this is sewn up, everything would match. You can see what I have. So I'll go ahead now and cut this out. After cutting, I'm going to go ahead and notch this dart point this way. Okay, so I will be able to retrace it on the other side of the front and on the lining pieces as well. So I'll go ahead and pin them up this way. You can see how I'm demonstrating. I'll pin the 1 inch this way, okay, with other mid the 2 dart legs meeting, and then I'll go ahead and sew them. I'll sew on the wrong sides. I'll sew for each side of the front and the lining piece as well. Then for the lining is going to be shorter than the main fabric. The lining should be 2.5 inches shorter than the main fabric, because I added 1.5 inches hemming allowance to the main fabric. So it's going to be 2.5 inches shorter than the main fabric. Okay, then for the back piece, I folded my fabric the same way I did for the front, except that I added extra 2.5 inches for the zipper allowance and for the overlapping vent. I'm going to use an overlapping slit. From the shoulder to 9 inches is the chest line, to 15 inches is the back half length. The front half length I used 17 inches. Then from the back half length, you measure 9 inches downward for the hip line. Then the total length at the back will be 58. In front, the full half length in front I use in front is 60. At the back I use 58 because of that difference in the half lengths. And then I added my hemming allowance of 1.5 inches like I did in front. Using the 3 each 8 inches 8 inch standard, I'm going to get the shoulder slope. At the 8 inches point, I came down by half an inch for the back shoulder slope and connected to the 3 inch point. Then on the shoulder line and on the chest line, I'm imputing 8.5 inches, which is the half of the shoulder measurements. Okay, and I connected. Neck width in front and back are the same, 3.5 inches. For the back neck depth, I used 1.5 inches. I'm taking my shoulder joining allowance. Now from this point on, all the other measurements will be the same as what I have in front. All the circumference measurements, the bust measurement is also the same measurement I took in front. Then for the back armhole, when I find the midpoint of the distance between the shoulder slope and the chest line, I'm not coming inward like I did in front. That's just the difference. Then I'll go ahead and take all other measurements. The measurements, circumference measurement I took in front is the same thing I'm repeating at the back. So I'll go ahead and take all my measurements and connect them accordingly. Now for the zipper allowance from the shoulder line, okay, from this point I'm going to be measuring outward 1.5 inches till I get to the hip line. This is for the zipper allowance. Okay, so I'm going to measure 1.5 inches. Then I'll go ahead and connect them. From the shoulder, I'll connect to the chest line. Then on the waistline, to eliminate zip bulge, I'm going to come inward from that measurement by 3/4 of an inch, 0.75, and then connect. And then from the hip line, I'll come upward by 2.5 inches, measure 1.5 inches, and connect it to the measurement on the waist. I'll go ahead and replace this measurement to avoid shortage. You can see I'm replacing it by the side. Okay, then for the zipper, for the slits at the back, I'll measure what I want for the length. So from the hip line, I'm measuring 18 inches. For the 18 inches downward will be my slits at the back. Okay, so I'm going to, at this place, at this 18 inches, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches and connect to the hip. I'm going to connect it to the hip. Now, if you don't understand how to make these overlapping vents, because this video is more about how to take the underarm dart, I'll be dropping a link in the description box. The title of the video is how to make a short pencil skirt. I'll drop the link in the description box. I made an overlapping vent for that skirt and I explained very well. I'll drop the link in the description box. Just watch the video and you understand how to take this whole vent and how to close it up. Okay, so I'll just drop the link in the description box. You can check that video out. So after cutting this, I'm also going to reduce the lining piece. I'll reduce it by 2.5 inches like I did for the back part. I'll use the lining to turn the main fabric. So here, this is the front. I've gone ahead to sew in the darts I took, so you can see what I have. You can see how it looks at this point, and I've also sewn in the darts for the lining piece, so you can see what I have. I would go ahead, use the lining piece to turn the neckline. I would notch and top stitch to the lining part. I'll also then turn the hem part before I turn the sides. Okay, that's what I'll do. I'll do that for the back pieces as well. I'll turn them. So here you can see what I have. I've turned everything and I've ironed properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to decorate this with, I'm going to use a black bias velvet bias to decorate this. So you can see this video, this picture that is showing here. That's what I want to achieve. So I'll go ahead and place it. So to do that, you need to iron a crease at the center front of this front piece so that you can place it. Okay, so that the edge will be touching the ironed crease. Okay, so you go ahead and sew. Before you sew, you can use hemming gum to hold this down, but remember to cover up the velvet so that you don't damage it while ironing. So after doing that, I'm going to join the front and the back by the shoulder. Okay, and this is how I'm going to join it so that I'll have a neat finishing at the shoulder. Okay, so after doing that, I'll go ahead and close the sides. I'll sew the sides together. So when you sew this way, after taking the bust, that you notice that despite the difference in height, they will all match up when you sew them together. Okay, because you've taken the that. So you go ahead, install the zipper at the back and also close the vents accordingly, the slits accordingly. So for the sleeves, I've folded my fabric. I'm cutting the two sleeves together. The length of the sleeve is 14 inches, including the joining allowance. Okay, so for the calf size, I'm using 4 inches and I'm just making a curve for the sleeve head. At the sleeve opening, I'm going to use a total of 9.5 inches, including the joining allowance, and I'll just connect. Okay, so I'm making this way because I'm going to add a band. I'm going to make a drawstring at the opening, the sleeve opening, so that's why it's this wide. I'll go ahead and cut this out. I'll also use this the main fabric to cut the lining piece for the sleeve, the lining pieces, because I'm going to line the sleeves. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to attach a band to this. So for the lining piece, I'm going to use it to turn only the sides. I won't turn the lower part of the sleeve, the sleeve opening side. So for the band, I've cut a band and it's on fold. The length is a little bit longer than the sleeve opening, and on fold I have 1.75 inches. That is what I have on fold. Okay, so here I've made the dress, everything. I've installed the zipper, I've closed the vent. You can see one is overlapping the other side. Okay, and so when you look at the hem part, you notice that they match despite the difference in length of the front and the back. They match because of the bust that I also attached pocket to this. So for the neckline, remember I said I later extended my neck width in front, so I cut this out after sewing. So to avoid this for yours, just make sure you first attach the velvet bias before turning the neckline, before using the lining. Okay, I think that would be better. So here is my sleeve. I've turned the sides, I've closed it in. So it's now time for me to attach the band. I'm going to attach the band to the sleeve opening. So here is my band. It's already folded into two, and I would be using the bias velvet bias as a drawstring for this. So how I'm going to join this in, I'm going to notch the center front of the sleeve opening, the center, the midpoint. So I'm going to start joining from the midpoint. So with the band, I'm going to take one side and measure out about 1.5 inches out. Then I'm going to place them right side to right side of the band to right side of the sleeve. Then I'm going to pin all round before I start sewing. Okay, I'll pin all round. When I pin to the other end, I'm going to then sew with 1/2 inch allowance all round. I'm going to sew them together, the band and the sleeve, all round with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when I get to the end, the other end, this extra I have here, I'm going to hold them this way. I will sew about 3/4 inch up this way. Then I'm going to leave out 1 inch for passing the material for the drawstring. Okay, I'll leave out, I'll sew about 1/2 inch and leave about 1 inch, and then sew up the remaining parts. That's what I'm going to do. So I've done that. You can see what I have. I've sewn them together. This is what I have. Okay, so after sewing this way, you can see I'll go ahead and sew the remaining parts that I didn't sew on the band to the sleeve. Okay, then when I see, you can see my hand sticking out from the opening I left. You can go ahead and top stitch this opening. Okay, top stitch it all around to hold it in place. Then I'm going to fold back and iron in the remaining 1/2 inch I have on the other side. Okay, I'm going to, you see how I've ironed it. Then I'll go ahead and top stitch on the first stitch I've already made. Okay, so I've done that. You can see my two sleeves, you can see the opening on the right side, and you can see the back part is neatly finished. Okay, so what I'm going to do now will be to pass my velvet bias, which is the drawstring for this sleeve. I have a length of about 25 inches. You can make yours longer, but this is all I have left of the bias strip I have. So I'll use a safety pin and pass it through the opening I left. Okay, that opening I have, I'm going to pass it till I get to the other end, and then I'll bring it out. So when you bring it out, when you're wearing it or the person is wearing it, you have to tie it to the real circumference of the arm opening. You tie it. Okay, you make a tie. So to avoid fraying, you're going to fold the end of the bias strip. You just fold it and sew on it to avoid fraying from that point. So after doing all this, you're going to just attach the sleeve to the dress, and that will bring us to the end of today's tutorial. If you got value from watching this tutorial, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Until my next video, bye.